Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I am Chris. This is the growth and territorial expansion of the United States of America, 1776 to 1900. This is video has not been out very long. Very young channel, Central History Quest. Please check them out. Click that. I did subscribe. That's how I knew this video. I wanted to do it. So I saw it in my feed, so I subscribed to the channel so I'd remember it. This is strictly a me video. I'm seeing this right here. Okay, this is a longer video. Same title, so I'm just like, okay. Well, we're going to give it a look-see-loo, and why not? Before we get started, I have a little thanks button here. You can donate to the channel if you'd like to. Request a video, and your name sponsors that video. It looks like I'm a little glitchy. Oh well, let's just get into the video.
Of the United States unfolds here, decade by decade. The narrative of the United States unfolds here, decade by decade, starting in the 1770s. In many ways, this was where it all began. The cultural roots of the United States had been developing for centuries, beginning with the arrival of the first British settlers. What started as small groups of struggling pioneers evolved into 13 flourishing colonies. Yet these colonies grew increasingly discontented with British taxation and governance. Their petitions for reform were ignored by the king, leaving them with no choice but to declare independence. On July 4th, 17...
Just so we're clear. And this is nothing, but we're talking about 1776 and everything like that. This is not really the painting you'd want in this cluster because that's Andrew Jackson. This is from the War of 1812. This is in 1815 or 1814, 1815. It has, I'm not, it still involves in this territorial expansion, but if you want to use, I'm just pointing it out. Look, when they started, they were using video from like the early 1900s, so I could have nitpicked there too, right? I could have, but I didn't because I understood what they were saying. I'm just pointing this out just in case.
No choice but to declare independence. On July 4th, 1776, that is exactly what they did. Naturally, Britain did not accept this rebellion lightly. Though the first shots had been fired in 1775, the colonies were now officially in revolt. They faced the full force of the British Empire, outnumbered and outgunned, with slim chances of success. Unless you ask General George Washington and his army. Against all odds, they persevered long enough to carry the struggle into the 1780s. As it became clear that American forces...
That was actually real footage from the Revolutionary War. I also want to point out something. Okay, this is obviously the burning of the White House, 1812.
Chances of success. Unless you ask General George Washington and his army. Against all odds...
That is a painting of young Andrew Jackson being hit by a British... I don't remember what his rank was. Insignificant. This is Andrew Jackson after he was captured as a boy during the Revolutionary War. He got struck in the hand and in the head, which ended up causing some damage, and he ended up hating the British for the rest of his life because of it.
They persevered long enough to carry the struggle into the 1780s. As it became clear that American forces were holding their ground longer than expected, global interest in the conflict grew. France, a long-standing rival of Britain, took particular notice and even sent aid to the Continental Army. The war dragged on until an unexpected American victory at Yorktown turned the tide. By September 1783, Britain was ready to sever ties with its rebellious colony. A treaty was signed, and the United States of America emerged as an independent nation. Now came the challenge of governance. The first attempt at a governing framework, the Articles of Confederation, proved chaotic. It treated the 13 states as largely independent entities under a weak central government. Adopted in 1781, this system quickly revealed its flaws through tax disputes and uprisings. A constitutional convention was convened to address these issues, assembling prominent thinkers and leaders to draft a new framework. The debates were intense and nearly derailed by Southern states' insistence on preserving slavery. Ultimately, a compromise was reached, paving the way for George Washington's unanimous election as the nation's first president. Washington's presidency in the 1790s was not without its difficulties. He aimed to govern without political partisanship, but found himself navigating a divided political landscape. His ally, Alexander Hamilton, championed Federalist policies and often pushed for stricter measures, such as during a rebellion over liquor taxes when Hamilton proposed executing rebels. Washington rejected this, but used federal troops to suppress the uprising, demonstrating that the national government could enforce its authority. During this period, Vermont, Kentucky, and Tennessee joined the Union, signaling a growing nation. However, dissent brewed as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison opposed Federalist policies they viewed as overly centralized and monarchical. They formed the Democratic-Republican Party in response. Although Washington faced no opposition in his re-election bid in 1792, he surprised many by stepping down after 2 terms, a precedent that shaped future presidencies. His departure set up America's first contested election in which John Adams narrowly defeated Jefferson. Adams' presidency marked a turbulent era. Tensions with France escalated into a quasi-war in the Caribbean, while conflicts with Britain and Native American groups persisted. Adams' popularity waned after enacting the Alien and Sedition Acts, laws restricting immigration and punishing government critics, which backfired by energizing opposition forces. In 1800, Jefferson defeated Adams in an election fraught with uncertainty over whether Adams would peacefully transfer power. He did so gracefully, setting a critical precedent for future transitions of power. Jefferson's presidency ushered in a new chapter for the young nation. At this point, America was still a fraction of its eventual size, a reality that changed dramatically in 1803 with Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase from France. This acquisition nearly doubled U.S. territory and set the stage for its emergence as a global power. Jefferson also sought to ease tensions with Britain and France through a sweeping trade embargo, a move that proved deeply unpopular and economically damaging. Yet this decade was marked by other significant events. A notorious duel between Vice President Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton ended with Hamilton's death. Meanwhile, constitutional reforms allowed presidents to choose their own vice presidents rather than defaulting to election runners-up. Burr was replaced by George Clinton during Jefferson's second term. Jefferson's presidency left an indelible mark on U.S. history. It saw Lewis and Clark explore new territories, steamboats revolutionize transportation, and Congress end America's participation in the transatlantic slave trade.
One of the let me turn the slide off. One of the reasons why Jefferson wanted the Lewis and Clark expedition, a couple of reasons, but one of the reasons that isn't really talked about a whole lot is Jefferson believed that the further west you went, you ran a chance of finding dinosaurs. He kind of still thought they were around because to him it was unexplored. So he thought there would be dinosaurs there. And if not, potentially bones. And what's weird is Jefferson is the third president, was around Washington. Washington died never even knowing that dinosaurs ever existed, and they don't even know if he was ever told. Yeah, there were giant creatures that ran over the continent, all over the globe. He may never have even been told. Or if he was told, he just looked at it like, sure.
While states like New Jersey began abolishing slavery during this period, Jefferson's successful leadership paved the way for his successor and ally, James Madison, to take office in 1808. James Madison's presidency began in relative calm, but soon faced major challenges. By the 1810s, tensions over American expansion, British support for Native American uprisings, and trade disputes escalated, culminating in the War of 1812. Vice President George Clinton passed away in 1812 as the U.S. endured naval blockades and the burning of Washington, D.C. in 1814. However, under General Andrew Jackson's leadership, Americans turned the tide, capturing Florida and signing a peace treaty. Madison's administration also saw Louisiana and Indiana join the Union. His ally, James Monroe, succeeded him in 1816, continuing Democratic-Republican dominance by adding Mississippi, Alabama, and Illinois as states. The Supreme Court began asserting federal authority over state laws during Monroe's presidency. He is best remembered for the Monroe Doctrine, which opposed European colonialism in the Western Hemisphere. However, his legacy became complicated by the contentious election that followed. Andrew Jackson emerged as a popular candidate but lost to John Quincy Adams due to a lack of majority votes in a four-way race. Adams's presidency was marred by personal tragedy and political controversy. Jackson's term began with turmoil following his wife's death. He aggressively pursued policies leading to the forced removal of Native Americans from their lands amid rising tensions over slavery. The 1830s were marked by conflict as northern states outlawed slavery, while Nat Turner led a violent revolt against it. The Supreme Court struck down some of Jackson's Native American policies, but he ignored these rulings and continued forced removals, actions now viewed as genocidal. In 1832, South Carolina nullified a federal tariff, leading to a standoff that ended with Vice President Calhoun resigning. Martin Van Buren replaced him and later became president after Jackson's re-election. Van Buren's administration faced challenges like the Panic of 1837 and continued conflicts over Native American removal, including the Trail of Tears. The 1840s began with William Henry Harrison's presidency, which was cut short when he died just a month after taking office. John Tyler assumed the presidency but struggled politically and was not renominated by his party. James K. Polk then took office, greatly expanding U.S. territory through state admissions and war with Mexico following Texas's annexation. The slavery debate intensified during this period with Dred Scott's lawsuit for freedom ending in a Supreme Court ruling denying rights to black individuals. The 1850s were defined by escalating tensions over slavery. Zachary Taylor died shortly after taking office and was succeeded by Millard Fillmore. The Compromise of 1850 attempted to ease conflict, but failed amid violent clashes in Kansas and brutal incidents like Charles Sumner's assault in Congress. Franklin Pierce's presidency saw further deterioration of national unity as James Buchanan took office during economic struggles while John Brown led violent anti-slavery actions. The nation stood on the brink of civil war as divisions deepened over slavery and states' rights. The anti-slavery movement found its champion in Abraham Lincoln, who gained prominence through debates with moderate Stephen Douglas. In the tumultuous 1860 election, a four-way race that included Douglas and Buchanan's Vice President John Breckinridge, Lincoln emerged victorious. Fearing Lincoln would threaten their way of life, Southern states began plans to secede before his inauguration, starting with South Carolina and Texas. They elected Jefferson Davis as their president. An attempt to secure slavery in the U.S. Constitution failed, and shortly after Lincoln's inauguration, Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter, marking the official start of the Civil War. The Confederacy proved formidable, even breaching Union territory during fierce battles in Pennsylvania, while the nation celebrated the centennial of its Constitution. In the 1890s, reform movements gained momentum with legislation like the Sherman Antitrust Act and women-led suffrage organizations advocating for voting rights. Idaho and Wyoming became states, while Yosemite National Park was established as part of growing conservation efforts. However, injustices persisted. Nearly 300 Dakota individuals were killed in what became known as the Wounded Knee Massacre. Labor disputes also escalated into major strikes among steelworkers. Benjamin Harrison was regarded as a competent president, but remained overshadowed by his controversial election victory. In 1892, Grover Cleveland made history as the only president to return after losing re-election by defeating Harrison amid an economic depression that incited
Now there's been a second one.
militant labor actions. Meanwhile, racial tensions intensified when segregation laws were upheld by the Supreme Court in Plessy v. Ferguson, which ruled that separate but equal facilities were constitutional. Utah gained statehood, Henry Ford built his first automobile, and the Alaskan Gold Rush began. Once again, the nation prepared for a change in leadership. Following the unofficial two-term limit, even if non-consecutive, Grover Cleveland was succeeded by Republican William McKinley, who defeated the fiery populist Democrat William Jennings Bryan in 1896. McKinley's presidency quickly became dominated by foreign affairs when the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor, killing 268 sailors. This tragedy, one of the worst disasters in U.S. naval history, led to war with Spain. The conflict arose amid Cuba's struggle for independence from Spanish rule, with the U.S. blaming Spain for the explosion. The war lasted only 10 weeks and ended with a treaty that ceded several Spanish territories, including Puerto Rico and the Philippines, to the United States. McKinley also annexed Hawaii and took control of American Samoa, establishing himself as one of America's most imperialist presidents to date. As the 20th century approached, McKinley faced personal loss with Vice President Garrett Hobart's death and selected controversial New York Governor Theodore Roosevelt, a progressive figure and hero of the Spanish-American War, as
Hold on. I don't know if he willingly selected him. He was kind of pushed onto him because the people in New York wanted to get rid of him because he was just some troublemaker to them. And thank you. And at that time, the vice presidency is, I mean, it's not as much now, but the vice presidency was a place where you politically went to die. And so they thought nothing will shut him up faster than giving him the vice presidency. Unfortunately for them, they didn't see William McKinley being assassinated, which put him into power. He hated Teddy. Theodore.
his new running mate. Party leaders hoped to sideline Roosevelt by confining him to the largely ceremonial role of vice president. Nevertheless, this unlikely pair easily defeated Bryan for a second time and entered office with high hopes for the new century. McKinley emerged victorious while keeping Roosevelt contained in a position with limited power. However, uncertainty loomed over what might come next as America stood on the brink of a new era. What are your thoughts on the actions of our country's founding fathers? Share your insights in the comments below.
I think, let me go
The
back.
narrative of
So, there you go. So, I mean, yeah, you could end it there because that's kind of where the expansion stopped. But I like the video, but yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't have. I would have done it a little differently. I would have included what every single president, the territories that were expanded in that presidency. Didn't really do that, but it was still a good video. I found it interesting. It was nice. So I hope you enjoyed it. We're gonna end it here. Check out the channel, subscribe to them. You know, I always like when somebody's doing these types of videos. Anyways, until next time, have a good day, have a good night.